Hey, how's it going? It's Nick here, and I signed up for the MAPC print conference members exchange, and I've been working on this wood engraving for a good 6 months or so. I knew it was coming. I'm taking my time very slowly, and in true printmaker fashion, I procrastinated too much, and then at a certain point I realized I wasn't going to get it done in time, and so I decided to hard pivot and start a new print altogether. So here's a little story about me making a quick little 2-color linocut. So of course, first we gotta start with our registration. Here I'm using a little registration L with some registration pins attached to it. Even though I'm just printing a completely solid, no carving first layer, registration, super important. You gotta set yourself up for success with your registration. Next up, I'm gonna do a nice transparent yellow to yellow orange background layer. That's just my go-to. I don't know, whenever I think of ideas, I just love this little warm yellow color scheme. I can't seem to bring myself away from it. And so I'm just going to go from this Daniel Smith Hansa yellow down to a little apricot Charbonnel yellow. I love this Charbonnel apricot yellow. It is my most used ink in the studio. And even though I'm printing such a large area and so many prints, I'm only going to squeeze out a tiny bit of the color because most of this is just going to be the transparent base. And pro tip, if you squeeze out a little too much and there's a little pressure kind of oozing some out, you can kind of squeeze back on the lower half of the tube to kind of suck your ink back in. That way you don't get a big messy area in the cap. And then since I need to get this done in like 2 days, I'm going to go ahead and add some dryer to my ink. And I like to add my dryer to the transparent base because that's going to be the majority of the ink. And then I know that both colors are going to have kind of like the same ratio of dryer in them because I'm using this big dryer pool for both inks. But yeah, look how little ink I use of like actual color to transparent base. I don't know why this needs to be a super transparent layer because there's nothing going on top of it, but I think I just like the subtlety of the paper texture just kind of showing through the ink, kind of like a little watercolory texture, you know? And since this is a really loose transparent base, I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit of magnesium carbonate back into it just to stiffen it back up. I don't really want my ink squishing out everywhere as I print this first layer since it's so much ink and so much pressure. And then I'm going to go ahead and lay out that bead. And we're just going to do like a half and half kind of deal today. I'm not feeling too ambitious with this because I got to get it done in a few days. And I'm going to use my roller because that's going to be the fastest inking up for all of these prints. I'm going to be using so much ink I'll probably have to recharge the slab every other print, if not every single print. And in theory, because this is a rectangle, it shouldn't matter, but I'm gonna go ahead and mark the corner of my lino block so I can put the exact same corner in my registration jig every single time. And after a few passes where I can't really see any streaks or lap marks from the roller, I know it's good and ready for a print. Go ahead, put my block down, slide the registration L into place, and then I'm gonna go ahead and put my paper on the pins. Double check that it hasn't shifted, and then I'm going to give it a little safety pat to kind of stick the ink to the paper a little bit, and then I'm going to go ahead and put my tempin down. And I'm going to use a hard tempin just because it gives me a nice even pressure, and I'm going to be using a tempin for the second layer and I don't have to switch the pressure up twice. And voila, there is a simple yellow to yellow orange gradient, my favorite. But it's too early to celebrate. We gotta put this print on the drying rack and get started on the next one. And I'm gonna clear my workspace because I just have clamps scattered around and I keep stepping on them. That's the problem with printing at home. You just kind of leave your stuff everywhere and it gets a little messy sometimes. So I'll let you in on a little secret of why I like to do 2-color lino cuts as my fast thing. So the paper that I'm using is very hard, but also very cheap. It's kind of like Stonehenge paper. It's got some texture to it, and if I were to print the black and white image straight onto it, I would have a very textured image. It'd be very hard for me to get a very solid black because of the texture of the paper, unless I use so much ink that my image fills in or so much pressure that it crushes my lino block. But if I lay down a layer of ink over the whole thing first, it kind of gives the piece of paper a little bit of more static cling, think of litho, how oil likes to stick to oil. So if I already have an oily layer of ink on my paper, my second oily layer of ink is going to transfer on over a lot easier than it would before. And so I can get a richer black layer without having to use extra pressure or dampening my paper. After I've cleaned my block off and I'm done printing, I'm going to go back to the drawing board, transfer on over my sketch with some iron oxide transfer paper, and then get to the fun part, carving. Another secret for my fast turnaround times, I always do self-portraits because it's one of the easiest things for me to carve because I've done it so many times, and I am the fastest model that I can get with no notice or pre-planning. So it just always works out like that, you know? And I always imagine a really dark scene, and I try to put like one light source in it, and I start by carving the things that I think are closest to that light source or should be lit up by that light source. And so that's why I'm starting with all of the facial features that kind of push forward first. And then once I've kind of got that, I just like slowly start rounding out the face, so like things that I think are gonna get middle tones and then maybe partially lit up. I usually start with features closest to the light source, and then I slowly just kind of move away from it and add slowly like that. I like to do my carving in little hatching, small bursts. I try not to make long lines. Usually every line that I carve is probably no more than half of an inch tops. And so take it in small bites, that's what I think. And I don't know, it makes it kind of look not too stringy in my opinion. And then for things like arms, your arm is just kind of a long tube, and carving it kind of like a long tube is kind of boring. But when you look closer, your arm kind of has a lot of compound curves, and I tried to follow that. I tried to mimic the muscle structure underneath the skin by kind of changing the direction of the hatching ever so subtly, where the arm just kind of subtly changes directions. Lastly, we've got this burning quesadilla. The theme of this conference is from the ashes and the idea of revival and renewal after destruction. And so the story of the burnt quesadilla kind of goes back to one long ago. One of the first things that I've ever burned while cooking is when me and my friend Huidwan were cooking. It was refried beans and cheese quesadillas, and we let that thing burn on one side. But you know, you burn one side of the quesadilla and then you learn for the next one that, yeah, it doesn't need that long. But you wouldn't really know that until you've kind of gone and burnt your first one. And so I feel like it's a fitting story for this kind of learning through destruction. Both of him and I have gone on to be much better chefs since that one time back in 2015. Him better than I, but I think we've both gotten better at cooking. And now it's time to finally print the key layer. And so I'm going to use this Hawthorne Stone Litho Dense Black. I think it's a little too tacky for Stone Litho, at least me printing it, but it works really well for relief. I like how stiff it is, but I don't want it to be pitch black. It might be a little bit too dark for this image, so I'm going to go ahead and cut it with some of the Forbidden Peanut Butter. I think this is just a leftover yellow ochre. I'm not quite sure where it came from, but it's been sitting on my shelf for a long time. Again, I'm going to go ahead and use my big roller because this is a lot of ink and it's going to speed up the process quite a bit. A few passes over my block, and then we're going to hit it with the same registration system, making sure that I get the same corner into the registration L as I did last time. A firm pat on the back to make sure the paper sticks to the ink. I'm going to pop off my registration system because you never want to run your pins through an etching press. My hard timpin, because felts would push ink into my delicate lines, and so a hard timpin will kind of stop it from pushing all that ink in there and filling in my lines. And then one more time through the press. And then you know what? I think this came out quite well. Black and white images are great, but I feel like adding that second color just kind of makes it feel more like a finished project. You know, it's not quite feeling like it was last minute because I don't want people to know that I did this last minute. But yeah, there we go. Finished print. Now I just have to do it 19 more times and then get myself 12 consistent prints. Sorry I haven't posted much in the last 2 months. A lot has happened since then. I got a haircut, the mullet's finally gone, I've been doing a lot of teaching. I've been working on some fun new projects, such as upgrading the plastic etching press and working on a potential litho press that's 3D printed. And I've been working on a kitchen litho project that I promised a viewer that I'd work on 5 months ago. And for the most part, I have a ton of things that I need to get ready for this upcoming Mid-America Print Council conference. And so I've got a bunch of things recorded, I just haven't had time to sit down and edit it, and I've got a ton of other videos coming after this print conference, I swear, just stick around. Anyway, 2 days before the conference, my prints were dry, and I came home from work, took a nap, and then went back to printing, and I found that my dad had left me some sweet potato pie while I was taking a nap, and I don't know where he got this from, because I've never seen this in the house before, and it didn't quite taste right. But I don't think he tried to poison me, so I ate it anyway. And I actually like straight clean edges on my paper, so I fired up the stack paper cutter so I could cut off all of the excess where my registration holes were, and then just call that a day. After a thorough inspection and picking out the 12 best prints, I was ready to go ahead and sign and edition these prints. So I just put the edition number on the left, title in the middle, and then signed on the right. And if you do it any other way, you're wrong. Lastly, I just need a sheet of glassine to put in between each print. We do this so the ink from the prints doesn't offset onto the back of the next sheet of paper. And since these editions are always the same size from conference to conference and year to year, whenever I get a stack of prints back, I just save the glassine and I just put those in between my next year's prints. Except the last 2022 print conference, I didn't get any glassine between my prints. Where's my glassine, Kent State? So I hope you enjoyed this print process, and if you want to see what prints I get out of this exchange, check out the MAPC vlog, which should hopefully be 2 videos from now. Bye.